Consider the difference between a sniper and a man emptying a magazine in every direction. One fires once and changes the outcome. The other makes a great deal of noise and hits nothing he meant to. Most people work like the second man, scattering attention across a dozen open fronts, feeling productive because they are exhausted by sunset. Deep, undivided focus on one thing has become rare enough that it is now a genuine advantage, and the man who can do it is worth 10 who cannot. Every time you switch tasks, your mind leaves a residue behind on the last one, a drag that makes the new thing slower and worse. You are not built to run 6 things at once. You were sold that lie by a culture that profits from your fractured attention. Close the tabs, pick the one target, put everything you have into a single shot. There is a quiet arrogance in thinking more is always the answer. More tasks, more tools, more hours, more hustle, as if the path forward were simply to pile higher. But the master in any field is known by what he has removed, not what he has added. The sculptor does not build the statue. He takes away everything that is not the statue. Your life works the same way, and you have been doing the opposite. Adding and adding until you can barely move under the weight of your own commitments. Subtraction is the harder discipline because it asks you to admit that some of what you are carrying was never worth carrying. Cut the obligations that drain you. Cancel the subscriptions of the soul. The man who owns 10 things he loves lives better than the man buried under 1,000 he tolerates, and the same arithmetic rules everything you do. Rest is not the reward you get after the work. Rest is part of the work, and the man who skips it is sabotaging the very engine he is trying to drive harder. Your brain consolidates, repairs, and solves problems in the background while you sleep, which is why the answer you chased all day arrives in the shower the next morning. Push without recovery and you do not get stronger. You get depleted, and depleted men make stupid, expensive decisions. The grind culture sold you a half-truth. Yes, you must work hard, but the hardest workers who actually last treat their recovery with the same seriousness as their effort. They sleep like it is a job. They take the walk. They protect the off switch as fiercely as the on. Stop wearing your exhaustion like a medal. It is not proof of virtue. It is proof you have not yet learned to work like a professional. Imagine carrying a backpack and adding one small stone every time you make a decision. By noon, the bag is heavy, and by evening you are making choices not because they are right, but because you are too tired to think straight. That weight is real, and researchers have watched it bend even disciplined people toward the easy and the impulsive as the day wears on. This is why the men who achieve the most tend to decide the least. They wear the same clothes. They eat the same breakfast. They automate the small stuff ruthlessly, so the heavy thinking lands on the few decisions that deserve it. You are spending precious mental fuel deciding what to eat and which task to start, then wondering why you have nothing left for the choices that shape your future. Strip the trivial decisions out of your day and hand that reclaimed energy to the things that count. Speeded is not the same as direction, and a man can sprint his entire life down the wrong road. This is the trap hiding inside all the talk about productivity. You optimize, you systematize, you squeeze more output from every hour, and you never once stop to ask whether the thing you are getting better at is worth doing at all. Efficiency applied to the wrong target just gets you to the wrong place faster. The pause to ask why, the willingness to sit with the uncomfortable question of whether this is even your path, feels like wasted time to the man addicted to motion. It is the opposite. An hour spent deciding what matters can save you a decade of climbing a ladder leaned against the wrong wall. Slow down at the start so you do not have to start over at the end. Aim before you fire, every single time. Friction is the silent thief of follow-through. You meant to go to the gym, but the bag was not packed and the clothes were buried and the small hurdles stacked until the couch won. You meant to write, but the document was not open, and your phone was within reach, and the path of least resistance pulled you under. Most failures of discipline are not failures of willpower at all. They are failures of design. The man who succeeds quietly engineers his environment, so the right thing is the easy thing, and the wrong thing is a hassle. He lays his clothes out the night before. He deletes the apps. He makes the good choice almost automatic and the bad one annoying. You have been blaming your character for problems that were really just bad setup. Stop relying on motivation you cannot summon on demand. Build a life where doing right requires no heroics. A man stands before a field of weeds and tries to pull everyone, and by dusk he is broken, and the field still looks the same. Another man finds the few roots feeding the whole mess and cuts those, and the rest withers on its own. This is the entire secret, and it is not really about working less or working more. It is about finding the root, the one lever that moves the most, and refusing to be distracted by the 1,000 surface problems begging for your attention. Your life is full of weeds you keep yanking at. The small fires, the busy work, the urgent things that are never important. Meanwhile, the few roots that would change everything sit untouched because they are harder to find and harder to face. Stop pulling weeds, find the root. Put your whole strength into the cut that actually matters, and let the rest fall away on its own.
Consider a simple example. Suppose your ideal life includes physical strength, financial independence, deep focus, meaningful relationships, and creative work. Fine. Now examine your day honestly. Every activity enters the filter. The workout passes, reading passes, building a business passes, learning a skill passes, deep conversation passes, endless scrolling fails, gossip fails, random arguments online fail, consuming content for 3 hours fails, complaining fails. Suddenly the audit becomes uncomfortable because many activities occupying enormous amounts of time contribute nothing to the future being pursued. The filter reveals reality more accurately than motivation ever will. Motivation lies, intentions lie. The calendar tells the truth. The first thing most people discover when performing this exercise is not how much they need to add. It is how much they need to remove. This surprises them because modern culture teaches addition. More goals, more projects, more commitments, more responsibilities, more information, more content. Yet every meaningful life is built through elimination first. A sculptor creates beauty by removing stone. A warrior becomes faster by removing unnecessary weight. A focused mind becomes powerful by removing distractions. The filter exists primarily to identify what does not belong. Once the unnecessary disappears, the necessary suddenly gains room to breathe. A fascinating psychological shift occurs when a person begins filtering life through a clear vision. Decision fatigue decreases dramatically. Most people waste enormous mental energy deciding things that should never have been decisions in the first place. Should I train today? Should I work on the project today? Should I study today? Should I focus today? The filter removes much of this internal debate. If the action serves the life being built, it happens. If it does not, it gets questioned. This creates clarity because the nervous system stops treating every choice like an emotional negotiation. The blueprint becomes the authority. The vision becomes the authority. Personal mood loses influence. Many men secretly suffer because their daily actions and long-term goals are fighting each other constantly. One part of them wants growth, another part wants comfort, one part wants excellence, another part wants convenience, one part wants freedom, another part wants immediate gratification. This internal civil war drains energy because conflicting priorities create friction. The filter resolves that conflict by forcing alignment. Every action either strengthens the future or weakens it. Every habit either contributes or consumes. Every commitment either supports the mission or distracts from it. Once this becomes clear, life stops feeling random. Direction begins replacing confusion. This matters because human beings become whatever they repeatedly reinforce, not what they admire, not what they talk about, not what they dream about, what they reinforce. A man who spends 10 years reinforcing distraction becomes distracted. A man who spends 10 years reinforcing discipline becomes disciplined. A man who spends 10 years reinforcing focus becomes focused. The filter determines reinforcement. It determines what receives time, attention, energy, and repetition. Those four resources shape identity more powerfully than almost anything else. Change what gets reinforced and identity begins changing automatically. Look closely at people living lives you admire. Their secret is rarely superior motivation. More often, they possess superior filtering. They say no more often. They protect attention more aggressively. They eliminate distractions more ruthlessly. They understand opportunity cost deeply. Every yes creates a no somewhere else. Every hour spent on one thing is an hour unavailable for another. The strongest people understand that life is finite, which means attention becomes sacred. They do not spend their days reacting to whatever appears. They spend their days executing according to design. That difference compounds over years until it appears extraordinary from the outside. The practical application is brutally simple. Define your ideal life in detail, not vaguely. Specifically, how do you work? How do you spend your mornings? What skills do you possess? What kind of body do you have? What relationships surround you? What kind of income supports you? What values govern you? Build the blueprint first, then run everything through it. Every task, every habit, every person, every opportunity, every commitment. Ask whether it strengthens the future or weakens it. If the answer is unclear, investigate further. If the answer is obvious, act accordingly. Most people already know what should stay and what should go. They simply lack the courage to perform the audit honestly. Your future is not being created by the goals written in notebooks. It is being created by the filters operating inside your mind every single day. Every choice passes through something. For most people, the filter is convenience, emotion, comfort, impulse, or social pressure. Replace those filters with purpose and the entire trajectory changes. A focused life is not built through endless effort. It is built through ruthless alignment. Once every action begins serving a larger vision, momentum appears naturally because energy stops leaking into directions that were never yours to travel. The audit may be uncomfortable. Good. Clarity often arrives carrying a knife.
The human mind possesses a dangerous tendency to overvalue visible activity while undervaluing invisible leverage. This is why many people spend hours organizing work rather than doing work. They consume content about success instead of building success. They talk about goals instead of executing goals. They research endlessly instead of testing reality. The brain enjoys these activities because they create the emotional sensation of progress without requiring the emotional risk associated with actual progress. The individual feels engaged, he feels informed, he feels busy, yet months later the results remain largely unchanged because the actions driving outcomes were never prioritized. A man can spend 5 hours discussing strategy and gain less than another man who spends 1 focused hour executing a critical task. This matters because energy is finite, attention is finite, time is finite. The nervous system cannot sustain infinite priorities. Every hour spent on low-impact activity comes at the expense of something more important. Most people never calculate this cost honestly. They evaluate tasks based on urgency rather than significance. They react to whatever appears loudest. The email feels urgent. The notification feels urgent. The request feels urgent. The distraction feels urgent. Meanwhile, the activities capable of transforming their lives remain neglected because those activities rarely scream for attention. Building a business does not send notifications. Training the body does not send notifications. Deep work does not send notifications. Learning valuable skills does not send notifications. The highest leverage actions often arrive quietly, while distractions arrive aggressively. A fascinating exercise exposes this reality brutally. Write down everything you do during a normal week. Every habit, every routine, every recurring activity. Then ask which 20% of those behaviors produce 80% of your positive outcomes. Most people discover something shocking. Their most important progress comes from a surprisingly small collection of actions. A few focused work sessions, a few workouts, a few meaningful conversations, a few disciplined routines. Then ask the opposite question. Which 20% of behaviors create 80% of the stress, anxiety, distraction, and wasted energy? Again, the answers appear quickly. Endless scrolling, constant notifications, certain relationships, certain thought patterns, certain habits, certain obligations. Suddenly, life becomes clearer because leverage becomes visible. The deeper lesson is psychological rather than practical. Most people operate as if every task deserves equal respect. This creates mental clutter. A disciplined mind understands hierarchy. Some actions matter enormously. Others barely matter at all. A warrior entering battle does not give equal attention to every sound on the battlefield. He identifies what matters and directs focus accordingly. Modern life requires the same skill. Not every email matters equally. Not every opportunity matters equally. Not every relationship matters equally. Not every problem deserves equal attention. The inability to distinguish between critical and trivial inputs creates overwhelm because the nervous system becomes flooded with information lacking hierarchy. Notice what happens when a man finally identifies his critical few. Clarity appears. Decision-making accelerates. Confidence increases. Distractions lose power because their irrelevance becomes obvious. The individual stops trying to win every battle and starts concentrating on the few battles that actually determine outcomes. This creates an unusual calmness because energy stops leaking into countless insignificant directions. Focus sharpens. Progress accelerates. Momentum builds. Outsiders often interpret this as increased motivation. When something more fundamental occurred, the person stopped wasting resources. A leaking system became efficient. You need this understanding because modern culture profits from keeping attention fragmented. Entire industries compete aggressively for your focus. Every application wants engagement. Every platform wants retention. Every company wants attention. Yet none of those entities care about your long-term purpose. They care about their own metrics. Without deliberate prioritization, your life becomes a collection of other people's priorities stitched together into a schedule. Then years pass and confusion appears because enormous effort produced surprisingly little fulfillment. The problem was not lack of effort. The problem was lack of concentration on what mattered most. Changing this begins with ruthless subtraction. Identify the activities creating the majority of positive outcomes and protect them aggressively. Schedule them first, defend them, build routines around them. Then identify the activities creating the majority of stress, distraction, stagnation, and wasted energy. Reduce them, remove them, limit them, question them. This process often feels uncomfortable because many low-value activities became emotional habits. They feel familiar, they feel normal, yet familiarity is not proof of importance. Many people spend years carrying behaviors that contribute almost nothing while consuming enormous amounts of energy. The audit reveals reality.
A distracted mind feels productive for the same reason a man spinning in circles feels like he is moving. Activity creates an illusion. Motion creates an illusion. Noise creates an illusion. The nervous system mistakes busyness for progress because both generate effort, both consume energy, and both create the sensation that something important is happening. Yet reality does not reward motion. Reality rewards completion. A bridge is valuable when it is finished. A skill is valuable when it is developed. A business is valuable when it is built. A body is valuable when it is trained. Every meaningful outcome emerges from sustained attention applied long enough for something real to take shape. This is why the modern obsession with multitasking quietly destroys so much potential. A man believes he is doing 5 things at once, when in truth he is abandoning 5 things repeatedly. Nothing receives enough focus to reach depth. Nothing receives enough attention to reach excellence. Everything receives fragments. Fragments rarely produce greatness. The brain was never designed to juggle endless streams of information simultaneously. It switches, then switches again. Then switches again. Email to project, project to message, message to video, video to notification, notification to conversation, conversation back to work. Every transition carries a hidden tax. Attention does not teleport instantly. Part of the mind remains attached to the previous task. Cognitive residue lingers. Energy leaks. Focus weakens. The person continues moving, yet performance declines steadily. This explains why a day filled with constant switching often feels strangely exhausting despite producing surprisingly little. The exhaustion comes from reorientation. The mind keeps unpacking and repacking itself. It keeps changing gears. It keeps restarting engines that should have remained running. By evening, the body feels tired while the important work remains unfinished. The energy disappeared during the transitions. A distracted existence creates another problem rarely discussed. It weakens trust in your own mind. When attention becomes fragmented constantly, thinking becomes fragmented too. One thought begins, another interrupts it. One idea appears, another replaces it. Reflection becomes shallow because nothing remains under examination long enough for insight to develop. Complex problems require uninterrupted thought. Meaningful decisions require uninterrupted thought. Personal growth requires uninterrupted thought. Without concentration, the mind becomes reactive rather than deliberate. It responds instead of creates. It consumes instead of generates. Over time, this creates a strange dependency, where silence feels uncomfortable because the brain has forgotten how to remain with a single idea long enough to explore it properly. The nervous system pays dearly for this habit. Every unfinished task occupies mental space. Every open loop consumes energy. Every interruption leaves residue. The person carries dozens of half-completed thoughts throughout the day without realizing it. A message remains unanswered. A project remains unfinished. An article remains unread. A conversation remains unresolved. Attention becomes scattered across countless locations simultaneously. This creates psychological weight. The individual feels overwhelmed, not necessarily because life contains too much, but because attention has been divided into so many fragments that nothing receives closure. Completion creates relief. Fragmentation creates tension. The body feels the difference immediately. This matters because energy follows focus. A concentrated mind conserves energy. A fragmented mind burns energy rapidly. Consider sunlight. Spread across an entire field, it warms gently. Focused through a magnifying glass, it can ignite fire. Human attention behaves similarly. Directed energy creates results. Scattered energy creates fatigue. 1 hour of focused work often produces more value than 4 hours of interrupted effort because the mind remains engaged long enough to build momentum. Momentum is precious. Once attention locks onto a task fully, work becomes easier. Creativity increases. Resistance decreases. Progress accelerates. Interruptions destroy that momentum repeatedly. Then the person spends the entire day rebuilding what should never have been lost. Notice how alive you feel after periods of complete immersion. Not entertained, not distracted. Immersed, a difficult workout, a focused writing session, a meaningful conversation, a challenging project. Time behaves differently during those moments. The internal chatter quiets. Self-consciousness fades. Presence increases. This is not accidental. The mind functions best when fully engaged. Human beings evolved to direct attention toward meaningful challenges, not divide it endlessly across trivial inputs. The satisfaction people seek through stimulation often emerges naturally through concentration. Deep engagement produces a richer quality of experience than constant novelty ever could. Changing this requires a different relationship with attention entirely. Stop treating focus as something that happens automatically. Treat it like a resource requiring protection. Create periods where only one task exists. Close unnecessary tabs. Silence notifications. Remove distractions before beginning. Allow boredom to appear without immediately escaping it. The urge to switch often arrives precisely when focus is about to deepen. Stay longer. Push through that moment. Remain with the task. Let the mind settle. Let concentration develop naturally. The first minutes may feel restless. Continue anyway. The reward sits on the other side of that restlessness.